welcome back to Timeless Topics. In this episode, we discuss everything from advocacy to role modeling slow, intentional change to intubation and leadership. We wrap the episode up with a discussion about supporting the nursing workforce and growing intuition. We're so grateful you're here with us. Let's jump right into the discussion.
But in everything that happens, there always has to be a first, right? There always has to be someone who's willing to take that first step forward and say and call out whatever injustices are happening, whatever inequality is occurring, whatever bias is being committed. Somebody has to step up and say, this is not right. And recognizing that when you are the first person, it may not be favorable outcomes for you.
Yeah.
But it also hopefully sets the stage for someone else to come behind you and say, I appreciate your courage in stepping out, and that gave me the courage to step out. And maybe over time, more and more people will step up and say, this is not right. And that's how we make change, right?
Yeah.
I hope.
That is such I mean, good golly, talk about what is it, synchronicity or something? I recently heard a similar situation where somebody, took the embraced their courage and stepped up to speak out and know, like they also have, just like everybody else, their own skeletons, their own, foibles, like I've messed up too, but I'm, are you going to always keep that on me, or do I get a chance to move forward? And they paid an ultimate price, and it's just bizarre, how we tend to just keep it all quiet. Let's not talk about any of this stuff that makes us feel so uncomfortable, and we're just going to keep on moving forward. And meanwhile, people are suffering, people are, hurting, people are being disrespected, and, just all of the things.
It's difficult too, because you can make that decision for yourself, right? Like I can sit and look at a situation and say, I know, and this is hypothetically speaking, I know if I say this, there's potential that I may lose my job. And you as a human being have to be okay with that. Now, I have multiple jobs. I'm okay with it. But I also have to respect if my accomplice who is sitting beside me says, I can't do that because I have to feed my children, right? And that is a hard line that you have to walk. I think a lot about all of the historical aspects we hear about, for example, the civil rights movement, and whether or not people were willing to step out and say, I'm here with you. I got your back through thick and thin, knowing that in those moments, and honestly, in moments today, right? You may be putting your life on the line, not just your job, not just your family's safety, but your life. And that's not none of that is an easy thing to kind of tackle.
Yeah.
But everybody has to make that decision for themselves. How much are you willing to stand up and say, I'm going to speak on this, right? And I know that at the end of the day, me speaking on this may mean I lose A, B, and C, but morally I gain D, E, and F. And hopefully I am paving the way for someone else to come behind me. And maybe they won't lose all of that, but maybe it will actually make a change.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a theme that we've brought up before, right? One person stands up and does the bold thing, two people watch them do that, and maybe that next person will be like, the next time this happens, I'm also willing to stand up. So maybe it's no longer one person standing by themselves, or maybe it is, right? Like maybe it's a series of individuals that are impacted by that. But, systems are made of individuals. You change systems by changing individuals, right? And embracing growth and the discomfort that comes with that and how to manage that, right? From an individual perspective will then lead to systematic change. It doesn't happen overnight, right? But somebody has to be that bold first person that says, no, like I can't sit here and just shrug my shoulders and nod and be like, oh, I guess that's just how it is, rather than being able to stand up and say, this is really just not okay. Like, I can't sit here and let this happen without acknowledging that this is not normal. This is not okay. And I think this is especially where, depending on whatever situation you're talking about, people that are not necessarily directly impacted by that are the ones that have the strongest voices, right? So thinking like that ally accomplice kind of mindset of being able to say, while yes, my job might still be at risk because capitalism is out here for everybody, but I have this privilege that can protect from this. It might not be instant or the same, or I still might feel discomfort in this, but I can have the moral comfort of knowing that I did the right thing, right? And lean into other systems of privilege to still be able to continue to do the work and other work, right? So that someone, like you said, Tracey, who can't stand up and do it, still feels like the work is happening, even if they can't be the one to contribute.
I wonder how we can tie this into the conversation of advocacy, right? Because this comes up all the time, or at least I feel like it comes up a lot in our advanced practice conversations, conferences, educational, right? And I shared with someone, I was like, I don't know that I really know, this is me being fully transparent, what advocacy means, right? Like what does that word really mean? We throw it out a lot, talk about it a lot. Advocate, 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 right? And when I'm sitting here and I'm hearing this dialogue between the three of us, this to me feels like advocacy, right? Because it doesn't always have to be. I think we talk a lot about the deeper conversations, the things that nobody wants to address, but it could be something, and I say simple, but this is not simple, as staffing ratios, right? Like you hear that conversation a lot within these discussions for sites that are going towards the union and sites that are not. But safety aspects, right? It could be advocating for or standing up, because now when I'm thinking, I'm seeing advocacy and standing up for something that you believe in as two in the same. And am I crazy in that?
I think you're right on point, Tracy. And I think traditionally, at least myself, I used to think of advocacy as a big thing, and you got a poster, and you're out in front, you're picketing and you're doing all of these things. But what I've learned over time is that there's a spectrum, just like everything, right? That yes, that's advocacy, speaking out when you bear witness to an injustice or any kind of an injustice, big or small. That's also advocacy. And also, advocating in the smaller ways, trying not to be linear here, but in the ways that I advocate maybe for myself. No, I can't take an extra patient because I'm busy with this and these things, and I won't be able to give that patient I'm advocating for myself. I'm also advocating for the patient. So I think that there's a continuum of that, and I think it's important for people to recognize it, because I think it's similar to leadership a little bit, like when folks say, oh yeah, no, I'm not a leader and I'm totally not an advocate either. And it's like, I just saw you advocate for that baby to do skin to skin. You're an advocate, like it or lump it, and be able to stand into um, that reality, because that is what we do oftentimes. But I don't think we use the word um, as freely or as comfortably as is warranted, maybe.
Well, because sometimes depending on who you're advocating to, right,
Mm.
it gets watered down as like, oh, you're just complaining, you're just not happy. And
Mm.
you're like, oh, no, I'm not, that's not what this is, right? Like, that's the cheapest way to look at this interaction.
Mm.
Because what I'm trying to do is raise awareness that this is a moral or safety or some kind of failure that is causing an inequity in either the outcome or the way this person is being treated. thinking again from that like healthcare lens, right? And being able to say, like, no, I think you think I'm complaining that it's taking too long to intubate this baby. I'm here to remind you that the AAP says intubation should take 30 seconds each, and every provider gets 2 attempts. So that's what I'm here to do. You can take that as complaining if you want, but I'm here to advocate for this baby's airway right now. So we need to get whoever is capable of getting this tube in right now to be the one to do this, or consider an LMA until we can figure out who that is, right? Got to put a plug in for an LMA. Your
I
girl
was
loves
going
an
to just
LMA.
say that.
Your girl loves an LMA. I can't help it. Okay. But like, there are things we can do that aren't continuing the same system. And that is advocacy, even though you might take it as, well, you just don't like me. That might also be true. Two things can be true. We can hold space for all of that, right? But right now, I'm addressing this particular problem from an advocacy lens for this patient's airway. I
I
just came
love
off an
that.
NRP class, so I'm like hitting hot.
I love that you brought up that kind of that response that oftentimes you experience during advocacy, because I think, and this might kind of come to what you were saying earlier, Tracey, about, so what is it? I think that these are both the same things, but we also are advocating in a system that has all of these built-in oppressive mechanisms, right? And so, oh, little lady, you're going to mouth off at me. I'm going to put you in your place. And I'm going to flip that, that advocacy that you think you're doing right around. And when I can do it in a public forum, I can actually then also offset maybe any of the role modeling benefits that may have ricocheted out from you standing up as a bold advocate in that moment to maybe any of these, younger, maybe less courageous, or maybe more novice individuals in the space. And so it is interesting, right? I mean, it's like it can muddy down the waters, but I think the opportunity we have is to help people see the clarity, help people read the room. This is what's happening. I am advocating. You may feel like it's complaining, and I'm going to help you, just like you did, and you're just so bold and cool. I think that's also wicked awesome about these conversations, because you really do help people see what may not be visible in the moment. Because if somebody spoke to me that way, depending on where I'm at, developmentally, psychologically, emotionally, I may shrink and shut up and let you try and intubate 4 times. Or I may, and need someone to help me, kind of reestablish my footing in my advocacy. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it can get complex, but I think it's probably a really important value for nurses and for all frontline individuals to cultivate.
Well, and I think in that vein, we take it back to the educational aspect as well, right? Like we start with teaching some of these aspects where we are advocating so that it doesn't feel so scary, so that that word doesn't feel so huge, and recognize that the things that we are doing based on our nursing knowledge, based upon what we are called to do as nurses, is a form of advocacy, and how we can use this to teach our new nurses, our learners, how them using their nursing judgment, their critical thinking skills, right, is a form of advocacy. And that as they grow in their career, as they mature in life, as they grow as human beings, that advocacy is going to reach out into more spheres, right? Because honestly, Jessi, I never would have considered saying, it's been 30 seconds. We've had 2 attempts. Someone else needs to step in. Other considerations. I never would have called it that advocacy.
Mhm.
Maybe I would have said I'm advocating for the patient, but again, full transparent moment here. I never compared advocacy to advocating for the patient, right? I always complete two separate spheres. I always considered advocacy as this big, scary, I'm going to legislation advocacy, right? I'll call her name. I think the Suzanne Stablers, right? That's advocacy. I don't do that. I'm not strong enough for that. That's not what I do. But so maybe breaking it down to that way makes it feel less scary for people. It makes us all in this profession and in this atmosphere say, yes, I do contribute to advocacy, right? And in different ways. I'm not speaking to my governor about this, but I'm speaking to my nurse manager. I'm speaking to the medical director. I am making change in a systems level, which ultimately, hopefully, will make change on a bigger level, right?
That's the point, right? Is we've let these terms become so mystified, right? Like equity, what even is that? We can't, that's not achievable. It's some big pie in the sky thing, right? When no, it's really not, right? You can make individual equity-based decisions that then lead to a more equitable practice. And it's realizing that you don't, perfectionism is not the goal. Perfectionism is one of the tenets of white supremacy, right? It's like looking at this idea that if you're not perfect, then why try? Just give up, right? And it's understanding that none of these systems are meant to be perfect and none of them are going to be solved in a perfect way. They're going to be solved in a series. So you're going to say this, I'm going to hope for this to happen. And then we're going to start working on this layer. And then we're going to start looking at this layer. And you just keep building and building and building. And eventually you get to equitable practice. But you don't start like overnight with that. Slow change that is insidious in nature is sustainable change. The change that people don't even really know is happening, like it's just role modeled, it's just part of the milieu now. That's how we combat all of these cultures that are rigid and don't want to change. We don't do it by blowing them up. It just doesn't work, right? I mean, think of all the war that we have had, and by no means is your girl a war historian. I know babies, okay? I don't know any of the other things. But think about all the war. Have we solved it? Have we stopped it? Have we had peace? Is that it? Did we do it? All the people that have died, all the people that have died, all the money that has been spent, all the damage to the environment and the culture and the planet, like all of that. Did we fix all the things? No, we're still fighting people. So you're like, well, then perhaps the like flashbang of it all is not really the way to do this. That we should be a little bit more individually and community oriented so that we know that if I'm good and you're good and I taught you how to be good and now you can go teach him and then her and then there. And the next thing you know, we have this like human chain of goodness that can then help make this change a possibility. Because there's going to be times where you have, to go back to the intubation example, you're going to have a new grad who's like, ooh, I remember they said it was 2 attempts, but this person's pretty scary. I don't think I can say that. But then someone standing next to them is like, hey, so it has been 2 attempts. Should we call in somebody else? Because this RT over here is ready to go. Like, I think they could get this tube in, right? And then that says, okay, I'm recognizing, I'm validating that you saw this as a concern. I'm also showing you real time how to do it in a non-confrontational manner, and the patient is still getting what they need, right? So it's being able to like do that slow role modeling and process change rather than waiting for things to just light switch on and off. Because if it were that simple, it would have happened already.
You know what? You just made me think of just that interchangeability or intersection maybe of role modeling and advocacy, right? When you were talking about, the kindness thing and I show some kindness, you show some kindness, the next thing you know, we're all holding hands kind of a thing. You're advocating for peace and you're role modeling that action, the action part of advocacy by your role modeling, activity. And it feels so seamless. And when we can distill it down to that interpersonal experience or exchange, it feels more doable. Like when I anchor myself in the baby and wanting to, protect the baby's situation and I'm monitoring and managing what's unfolding in the moment, because that's my role, right? Bearing witness to it. I'm not only advocating for the baby, but I'm also role modeling that advocacy so that others can then aspire and acquire the courage that they need by watching what I've done or others, and how you begin to weave that then into expectations. Because I think kind of coming back to the beginning, it can feel scary, right? Leaning in and stepping out of line and speaking up to be that advocate does require me to act courageously, even though I'm afraid. But what if we begin to build that level of competence, at least in the smaller ways, and set those as expectations, for, kind of as we're just talking now about new learners, new nurses, new nurse practitioners, to really help set the expectation that that is what is required of you. You've stepped into this profession, and there go, or therefore there are some leadership responsibilities that you have in that position that you hold. Even if you just stay in the NICU, I mean, I challenge and say it extends beyond the walls, but you know, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, part of the professional role is accepting that accountability and responsibility and then using it for our peers as well.
Mhm.
Not in a shame-based way, not in a, I can't believe you couldn't intubate this baby. It was so easy, but like, that's not helpful, right? But it's just being able to say, this is the standard that's been set forth. This is our goal and what we're going to try to do. So I'm going to hold us accountable to this goal and this plan to protect this patient, right? Which accountability doesn't always feel abundantly pleasant, but it doesn't have to be, getting whipped either. Like there's nuance available here
Yeah.
to where we can acknowledge, like, I know this was challenging, but I'm really glad that we were able to hold to this standard, right? To be able to say on the other side, even that I can acknowledge the discomfort, I can acknowledge the challenge of it, but also still say, but we did right by this patient doing XYZ, even if it meant we had to escalate or advocate or change things or all of that, right? And I think the NICU, to Mary's point, like, yes, it is a microcosm of everything else, but I think a lot of times some of the things in the NICU are very rigid for no good reason, right? We've talked about this in episodes before, where we're just like, well, we don't do that. Okay, well, why? Well, I don't know. No one's ever taught me, or I'm not comfortable. Okay, well, there's ways to change those two things. Like, you can learn and we can get comfort, rather than just continue to say we don't do that here. And the same could be said about larger systems. Like, we could say, that we don't provide equity-based care, but why not?
Mhm.
Right? And what does that look like? And how could we? And what are the tiny changes we could make that would shift us towards that?
Mhm.
Right? Um, Rather than just like staying staunchly in the like no camp.
You're making me think of, like, again, reconnecting with each other, with our humanity. First, when you said about the accountability, yeah, no, it doesn't feel good. But if you can help me be more accountable in a moment through a respectful rapport, respectful dialogue, or whatever, yep, it's going to feel icky, but I'm going to feel also seen. I'm also going to feel the other piece of it and not feel shamed in those other words. And when I can begin to have that experience with you, for example, right, then I feel less isolated, less competitive, all of the things that we do when we contract because we're disconnected from everybody and we feel like, that individuation thing, then I feel reconnected. And the same thing with the equity, I mean, if you can help me feel more connected to others, or we help each other, right? It's not your responsibility to make me feel connected, but if we can begin to reseed those threads of connection, I think that we become more resilient to constructive feedback, acknowledging our foibles, and wanting to reclaim, another shot at doing it better, or, recovering, and, that rupture repair stuff, that, again, will help me be a better advocate for myself. And if I can be a better advocate for myself, that's almost like a playground for me to build that skill, and also then being an advocate for you, you know what I mean? Kind of that sort of thing. So it's almost like self-generative and then perpetuative at the same time, if that makes sense.
And they always look at me like I'm crazy when I role model it back to them of how I would have answered that question. And they're like, oh, are we allowed to do that?
I was just thinking that question.
I was like, allowed? Ma'am, it's part of your license. Like, advocacy, that's a hat you wear. Like, you were supposed to do this. Oh, okay. But even just that like subtle push, sometimes you could see this like, oh, like just shock of, I would never do that. And I was like, well, you need to start
But it's
because
that aspect of giving permission,
yeah,
right? Like and empowering people to be able to use their voice.
Yeah.
Because we, depending upon where you have worked, depending upon your prior experiences, you feel like you're not supposed to say anything, right? And that it's not your lane, and that you are stepping out of your lane if you do say something, right? You're made to feel like in some situations and in some institutions, keeping it real, you're
Mhm.
made to feel like you're not smart enough to say anything, right? Because of the initials behind your name or the lack of certain initials behind your name. So, no, don't say anything. And so I do think your mentoring in that aspect, your role modeling allows people to have that sense of, oh, I can say this and do this, right? Again, we're all respectful of our scope and what our scope is supposed to be. But I don't think anybody's scope of practice says they have to sit there and be mute. Right? Like, I mean, I know we sometimes think that, but I don't think anybody's scope says that.
well, yeah, I mean, the R in SBAR is recommendation. Like that's what you're supposed to say. Now, oftentimes when you see it in education, it's, I recommend you come look at the patient. Well, I might have some additional recommendations on top of that, right? Like, and again, we're going to be respectful of scope. We're going to be respectful of the person, right? Like that person, even if I vehemently disagree with their decision, I'm still going to give them respect that is owed to any individual, right? So there's a way to professionally communicate it, but you can professionally be firm as well, and it's like learning and practicing those in safer environments so that then you feel like when the stakes are higher, you could step out and do it.
I think that's the turnkey, Jessi, is learning and practicing in safe spaces. Because I think kind of, I love that you said scope of practice, Trace, because I think some of my frustration comes out of how many nurses, in my experience, um, are not maybe familiar of the full breadth of their own scope of practice. And then I see physicians practicing or attempting to practice nursing practice or directing nursing practice. And, because of the society that we live in and all of those moving parts that have been like wired into us from childhood, we tend to contract, we tend to bow down and defer, and then we're abdicating our professional responsibility. We're abdicating our role as a leader in our discipline. And so I think, it just speaks to how wicked important it is during orientation or role transition orientation. I remember transitioning to be a nurse practitioner and how scary that was, really, because it feels like you're trying on new clothes, right? I mean, I'm trying on a new suit and I'm not sure it fits right. I don't know how to make it fit. Same as a new grad, kind of coming into that role. And because although while I thought, my undergrad nursing experience and my NP training, prepared me for many aspects of the do's. I didn't feel very prepared for the how, for the transition in how I now show up to this work and where are the boundaries so that I can practice to the full extent of my scope, safely, respectfully, all those kinds of things. And then, be a leader and also be an intentional role model and advocate for the practice. But because I do, I mean, I'm sure you guys have had this experience, where, I mean, nurses will just like, wait, I can't do that because I don't have an order for it. And you're like, that is a nursing practice. You don't need a medical order for nursing practice. I'm not, trying to get into a fight with the physicians. You know what I mean? But like, why are you sitting around waiting to do this in response to a patient's condition? This is part of your scope. So yeah, I think that's really important. And things can kind of fall apart. Like I can feel less courageous about being an advocate for X, Y, and Z when I'm not really feeling solid about the scope of my responsibility, of my practice in this setting because of these cultural situations, because of the way we do things here, because of the larger systemic oppressions, and all of that stuff just really muddies the water.
One of my other passions in life is thermal regulation. Like, I rail about it frequently. And it is a nursing driven practice. Thermal regulation support is owned by nurses, it is facilitated by nurses. We are the ones who help regulate and monitor and function and use the beds that help that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Doctors don't really know the ins and outs of those beds like we do, right? And so when you're waiting on an order to wean or to do this, they don't know. That's not their lane any more than you're expected to know how to run the vent, right? That's not your lane, right? So it's working that if everybody sings in chorus, then this will be a much more pretty song than if everybody's piping off by themselves. So frequently I'll go in and I was like, tell me a little bit about your bed settings. And they'll be like, well, I don't know. This is what the doctor said do. Why are you asking the doctor about how to use the bed? Again, no shade to the doctor, but that's not their lane here. I was like, this is a nursing driven practice. You have a practice document that tells you as a reference of how to use this. You have nursing leaders who can come and help you. You have peers who can come and help you. We have resources. We don't have to always look up the hierarchy. Some things are our practice to own. I feel the same way about developmentally supportive positioning and all that. That is a nursing lane.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying doctors can't learn, they can't participate, they can't be a part of it because I love it, right? Especially when you've got somebody who's very developmentally attuned, then you're like, oh, good, okay, we can do this the right way, like in together. But it's like, but that's not their specialty though. And that's okay. It's any more than I would expect a cardiologist to know what to do with kidneys. Like they understand what kidneys do and how they influence the heart, but he's a cardiologist in the end. So it's like, it's okay to defer to expertise, but we have expertise too. And I feel like as my career has gone on, I've watched people abdicate, like you said, that expertise. And it makes me so sad as a nurse who believes in nursing and the power and the impact that nursing can have. It makes me sad to watch it just slowly dwindle away.
Do you think that some of it stems from the fact that they're probably not, and I don't know this for certain because I don't teach undergraduate, but maybe they're not taught about their scope of practice in nursing school, right? Because again, I may be wrong. Not sure that that's going to be on NCLEX because some of it is different by state,
Yes.
right? And if it's not on NCLEX, we don't have time to talk about it. Just like if it's not on NCC boards, I don't have time to talk about it in the NNP program because there are 3 million other things that are going to be on boards,
Yeah.
5 million things that are going to be on NCLEX. So do I really have time to talk to them about scope of practice? Or is it one of those things that you just expect that you're going to get on the job training in your role transition? And depending upon your orientation, the type of hospital that you go to, the mentors that you have as your preceptors, it may just be you renew your license on your birthday. You need this many continuing education hours to make sure your license is renewed. And this is where you renew it. Done. Right? Because at least that's how I felt as a new nurse many, many moons ago.
Yeah.
I don't remember anybody talking to me about these things. It was a keep your license renewed. Don't do anything that would cause you to lose your license. Bam, done. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, now you're getting into the standardized testing industrial complex.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is
I
a
knew you were going to
whole
go there,
thing.
girl.
Of okay, well, if I'm only teaching to the test, whether it's the 5th grade milestones, or the, NCLEX, if I'm only teaching to the test so that I have a good success rate and I can report out a 97% pass rate or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Then I'm losing all those other things you need to know. Right.
Yeah.
So then we keep looking at the system and go, well, then the system needs to ask us about those things. Or you can say you could do both, right? Like we can pass the test and have a national standard as for licensure, right? Acquisition at least. And also, you're going to get an individualized discussion about what does scope look like. Now, does it need to be a whole like 3 hour credit class in college on just scope of practice? No, but it can be interwoven into all these different conversations. Because then what happens is you come in on the clinical side, right? So you leave academia and you come to the clinical side, and I'm expecting that you know a little bit of these things. And that is not the case, right? So then quickly I'm like, oh no, I got to fix that. So now this on the job training turns into a 6 month orientation, right? And still not getting fully across the finish line, right? So then I'm like, okay, fine. I'll do you a 6 month orientation. Sounds great. Let's do it, right? We got classes, we got skills, we got all the things, right? And then still turning you out somebody who still needs mentorship and support,
Yeah.
right? Because yes, I just ran them through this mini nursing school, but it's still not enough.
Yeah.
They are still, that transition to practice, like stress is still there. So then the nurses are like, well, how do they not know anything? They just graduated nursing school and Jessi just had them for 6 months. How are they coming out not knowing anything? And you're like, because you didn't know anything either.
Yeah.
But there was a system that didn't expect you to, right? And so now it's this like war of are new grads like killing nursing, right? Or are we just not supporting them the way that they should have been and the way that we were supported? It looked different, but we were able to go to a peer and they'd be like, oh no, baby, we're not going to do that. That's not a good idea. Right. And then you could be like, oh, it's not. Okay. Thank you. Like, what should I do? And you could talk together. Whereas that culture doesn't really exist in a lot of units anymore because the expectation is you've got so much systematic support that you should be fine. But the systematic support has been weakened throughout the years.
The systematic support right now is Chat GPT or Copilot
Don't get
or
me started.
whatever AI you want to use, right? And so that is some of the systematic support. And so and this goes into a topic that I know we've kind of flirted with, and maybe we need to have a full episode on the intergenerational aspects and networking and collaboration and communication and all of the things, right? Because and I don't know, again, I always admit when I don't know. I know that we talk about how there are the numerous generations in nursing right now. I mean, I would have to imagine that it's always been that way, but people make it seem like this is a new phenomenon, right? I
Mm.
remember vividly being 22, 23 years old. And one of my closest friends at work was some lady who was in her 60s, right? Because she was the one, right? And then in between, I had my colleagues who were in their 30s and some, I mean, we had all of these generations. And so I don't know why it feels so novel now, right? Because I look back on my first year of nursing and I was like, wow, we were really a diverse group of people and we all worked well together, and not just worked well, we were friends, right? Like we are at one of them's granddaughter's birthday party and somebody else's actual baby shower. Like that was the gamut that we ran, but we showed up for each other, right? And the grandchildren played with the children and the nieces and the nephews for those who didn't have children yet. Like we just all whatever. So why is it so novel now that we have all these generations? Which again, we've kind of veered off topic a little bit. I'm sorry.
But I think it's all woven together, truly, right? I mean, we always do this. We take detours and stuff, and then we come back and go, wow, that was an incredible conversation. But I think one of the things that came to mind when you were sharing, Tracey, is just the evolution of healthcare as an industry in and of itself as well. And how, I mean, I think it was always extractive to some degree, but I think it has really emboldened in that direction now that it's shifted into a more business, more intentionality around the business model and productivity and, what we can squeeze out of all of these, living souls that are doing the good work inside. And that's changed, I think, how we show up to these spaces, the rise in unions, in healthcare situations because nurses and other professionals don't feel seen, don't feel supported, don't feel safe in these spaces because of that performance piece and stuff. So I think that there's also been that kind of evolution as well in the backdrop. And I also do kind of wonder about, just has there been, I mean, I've been out of nursing school now for a wicked long time, and has there been an evolution in how these nurses are being educated in this space? Or is it still very much focused on performance and output versus assessment and critical thinking and really being able to truly observe and manage the human experience with disease across all these different populations? Because at the end of the day, there's always going to be a books. There's always going to be an AI. You can look something up. You don't have to memorize all that stuff. What you have to do is figure out how to internalize and embody the wisdom of being able to recognize subtle changes in coloration, subtle changes in, you know, affect, and just all of those things that are a tip off that something might be brewing behind behind the face. And then where do you go from there versus more of this kind of extractive checkbox, you got to pass the exam kind of a focus. And I did want to just say one other thing before I zip it. When you had mentioned about AI and stuff, and some of these challenges about almost like a mismatch with nursing and some of that gap, if you will, in fully understanding the full extent of your scope of practice. Jean Watson, who, I do love her, talks a little bit about, if nursing as a profession can't really get its act together and really celebrate and demand to some extent, recognition for the good work that we're doing at that human level, not the checkbox level, but at that human interface level, we are going to be subsumed by the larger system, and we will be replaced by AI because we have not done a good job in demonstrating the value that we bring to the human experience of illness, of recovery, and all of those things. And so, there's that piece of it as well that I think, again, is a reflection of the complexity of the system, the complexity of the requirements of us as professionals to not only be educated and lifelong learners, but also serious advocates of our profession as well, and the need for human beings to be cared for by knowledgeable, wise, critically thinking human beings at that level. Because, physicians they have a very clear pathway of how they serve humanity and disease management and all that kind of stuff. And many of them are kind and loving and compassionate, do all the good things as well. But they can't be a doctor and a nurse at the same time. Nursing is definitely a requisite in the human caring continuum, but we continue to kind of contract and not really demand recognition for the holistic work that we're doing that is critical, that literally, right? You can give all the meds in the world. That is not necessarily going to save someone's life. That life-saving piece is much richer, much more mystical in some cases, than just, take 2 cookies and call me in the morning and hopefully you'll be alive.
It's like the art and science of it,
Yes.
right? Like you need both, right? Both are needed, but sometimes it's just that intuition piece, right? Like I remember in nursing school being taught so much about gut intuition, and eventually you'll get it. You won't have it right in the beginning, but you'll have inklings and it'll grow. And the more experience you have, the more you'll be able to connect and be able to do that, right? And so I was like, okay, yeah, like that's going to happen one day. Like I'm going to do it. Right. And then like, it was happening, I was like, oh, this is what they were talking about. Like I kind of have this like thing, right? It feels like some weird superpower.
Yeah.
Now I'm super wired for it because of my trauma history, right? So hypervigilance is just my baseline, but it was also very like, empowering in a sense of like, oh, this is what I bring, because I could be the nurse who calls and says, I don't know what's going on, but you better come over here and we got to do something because something's happening with this baby. There has been a shift. I don't have a number. I don't have anything to give you, but the vibes are off. Okay. And I need you to just take that for what it is. But over time, it became, oh, if Jessi's calling you, you need to go look at the baby because something is likely going on. Right. And so when I try to encourage critical thinking and intuitive, growth and stuff in the new grads that I end up helping support on the clinical side, because they're taught to pass a test. They're taught to know this and leads to this and then have memorization type, right? And so it's like, no, you're missing the point though, because the person isn't going to show up like an NCLEX question. They're just not. They're going to show up in all their full complexity of all their full lived experience. And you've got to filter through and figure out what matters, what doesn't matter, what could be influential, but maybe not right now, maybe come in later. Like you've got to sift through all of that human experience to then take the care team information that is valuable for them to act on, right? And it can be frustrating for me sometimes because I was like, what's your gut say? And sometimes they don't know. They're not taught to like trust it, you know? Whereas I was like, it was like, you're going to get it one day where you're going to wake up one day and all of a sudden people are going to ask you what your read on the situation is, right? And you're going to have an answer. So I try to teach them as they're learning to like build this catalog of experience in their brain. And so once you have a clinical experience you've never had before, file that one away somewhere. The next time you have one, file it away. And eventually you're going to have this whole library that you could flip through really quickly and be like, maybe it's like that time with that kid from 2 weeks ago who did it presented like this and it ended up being that. No one thought that. And then you're going to be able to put it together. But it's really challenging to teach that while also trying to teach them how to function in a hospital, be in an ICU, deal with whatever dynamics are on that unit, learn technical skills for skills that they didn't learn on a population that they never saw in nursing school because no one's going to like full-fledged NICU. The NICU practicums exist, but they're still pretty sheltered somewhat. And all of a sudden you're pushed out there and you're trying to learn all those foundational skills and all of the other technical stuff, and they're overwhelmed, like they're saturated.
Even as a nurse practitioner, when you said that the clinical thing, that clinical acumen and being able to trust your gut, it's easier for me it was an evolution to trust my gut, because I felt so insecure, and I had this wicked, amazing neonatologist mentor who actually annoyed me. When he said, no, no, I'm canceling the x-ray. What do you think is going on? And I was like, gosh darn it. I'll tell you once I see the film. And then he walked me through it though, because I think that's also part of the evolution of your identity, right? As a professional is beginning to kind of like fill out the suit, feel more comfortable in this new skin and realize that these folks around me, they're not going to let me do something stupid. They're not going to let me, and so that's a good thing. Instead of me taking it personally and thinking he thinks I'm a dope. No, he was trying to help me build that intuitive awareness, that critical thinking to say, I don't think it's this and I don't think it's that. So I don't think the chest x-ray is really going to tell me anything. That leaves me in a spot that makes me feel wicked scared and unsettled, because my answer is I don't know what's going on with him. So we have to watch. Versus, like, how you want to fix everything right in the moment, right, Trace? Here you go. This is it. I'm going to write an order, do this, and everything's going to get better. And that gray space can just feel so uncomfortable at the beginning, right? And then after a while, you realize, oh, fudge, this is all gray.
As well as about the sales, like the entirety of the NICU is gray.
Yeah, but you lean into it and you begin to feel safe because you're not the only one that's feeling it. And we're all helping each other, hopefully, right? Hopefully we're all helping each other navigate that discomfort.
Because this is that moment when you're in that gray space and you're like, my gut is telling me this, but the nurse is advocating for this. And so this is when I then have to step out on the edge and say, I hear you. I respect what you're saying. My gut is telling me this, right? And I do think that is one of those learning moments because as a new NP, you do want to, one, have everybody like you, two, make no mistakes, three, keep everyone safe, right? But there's going to be that moment that you're going to have to go against what everybody around you is saying because your gut is telling you something, or maybe you have another piece of information, right? But it takes us all back ultimately at the end of the day to the original intent of this podcast: communication, circle time, giving each other grace. And part of that giving grace is that I can't have this thought in my head. I can't have this gut feeling. I can't be in this gray place and not tell others around me why I am hesitant to move forward with that x-ray, Mary, or the LMA, Jessi, right? But the LMA, to say, this is why, right? And so it's that stepping out on the edge and saying, I'm going to stand up for what I believe in, what I feel, what I know, while still respecting the rest of my team.
Timeless Topics is Jessi Barnes, Tracey Bell, and Mary Coughlin. It is produced by Jessi Barnes and music from Carlos Bell. The thoughts and opinions shared here are those of the individual speakers and do not reflect the official policy or position for any of the speakers' employers or any other affiliated individual or entity.